Welcome to Book Summary Podcast, your gateway to personal transformation. Each episode delivers big ideas from the world's most impactful books on mindset, productivity, and success, all in just a few minutes. Ready to turn knowledge into action? Let's get started.
Okay, let's unpack this. Imagine a doctor back in, say, 1931, performing surgery without a patient's consent and genuinely believing he knew the single right way to cure them. Sounds incredibly jarring now, doesn't it?
It really does.
Well, our guide today, Morgan Housel, uses this exact kind of striking analogy to kick off Chapter 20 of his brilliant book, The Psychology of Money. And he uses it to make a powerful and frankly liberating point about your financial decisions.
It's a fantastic analogy, really. And what's truly fascinating is how it mirrors the evolution of our thinking, not just in medicine, obviously, but also in finance.
Right.
Medicine has moved from that, doctor knows best approach to one that deeply respects patient autonomy, individual values. And Housel argues, well, our understanding of money has to evolve in the same way. There just isn't a single universal right answer for everyone when it comes to personal finance. This chapter, aptly titled Confessions, it really drives that home. It offers these universal truths, sure, but then emphasizes that how you apply them to your unique life, your unique goals, especially as an American maybe looking to build wealth, that's what truly matters.
Exactly. So our mission today is to dive deep into Housel's Confessions, this collection of actionable lessons and principles. And some of them are wonderfully counterintuitive, actually. They can help you navigate your financial life with, well, less stress and hopefully more success.
Yeah, less stress is key.
We're going to explore why these insights are so crucial for anyone looking to build lasting wealth and, maybe most importantly, how they empower you to define what enough actually means for yourself. Because that's a huge question, isn't it?
It is. And we won't just be, rattling off a list or something. We'll be connecting these confessions back to the powerful stories and vivid data points that Housel shared throughout the entire book, really revealing the profound, often hidden impact of our behavior on financial outcomes.
Okay.
We'll touch on everything from the surprising roles of luck and risk big ones to the true, often underestimated value of controlling your time, and even a candid look at the author's own financial choices, which is pretty revealing.
Interesting.
Yeah. This deep dive aims to give you a robust framework for making better financial decisions that really align with your life, not just some abstract spreadsheet somewhere.
Okay, let's jump right into the first confession then. Housel emphasizes the importance of humility when things are going well and forgiveness when they go wrong. It almost sounds like a life lesson more than just a financial one. What does he mean by that?
Oh, it absolutely is a life lesson. You're spot on. And that's precisely why it's so powerful in finance. Housel's core message here is that financial outcomes are rarely, if ever, 100% attributable to just individual effort. Luck and risk play incredibly significant, though often invisible, roles. It's that profound concept that things are, quote, never as good or as bad as they seem.
Right.
Think about the striking contrast he paints between Ronald Read and Richard Fuscone. Two very different individuals Housel introduces to really hammer this point home.
Okay, refresh my memory on those two.
Sure. So Ronald Read was a janitor and a gas station attendant from rural Vermont. By all accounts, he led an incredibly low-key, modest life, bought a small house, lived there his whole life.
Yeah.
Yet when he died at 92, he left behind an $8 million fortune,
Well,
all to charity.
$8 million. How?
Simply by consistently saving what little he could and investing it patiently in blue-chip stocks. For decades, he just let compounding do its quiet, relentless work, didn't chase anything flashy.
What's credible patience?
Now, compare that to Richard Fuscone. This is a guy who was Harvard-educated, Merrill Lynch executive, MBA, the whole 9 yards. Retired in his 40s to pursue philanthropy, a celebrated figure in finance.
Sounds like the opposite story.
Exactly, but Fuscone went broke.
Oh, really?
Yeah. His huge Palm Beach house was foreclosed on. His mansion in Greenwich, the one with the see-through pool cover people danced on, sold at auction for a fraction of its worth.
Wow. So what was the difference? It wasn't education or connections.
Housel argues the critical difference wasn't intellect or opportunity or even starting wealth. It was behavior. Read was patient, humble. Fuscone, it appears, was driven by impatience, maybe greed, excess. This vivid contrast really highlights how easily we misattribute success only to skill and failure only to incompetence. when often luck and risk are silently pulling the strings in the background.
That's such a humbling thought, isn't it? Because we're so sort of conditioned to believe in pure meritocracy. It's almost uncomfortable to admit how much luck plays a role because it feels like it diminishes our own hard work sometimes.
It does feel uncomfortable, but it's reality. And Housel suggests embracing that discomfort, especially when we talk about ego, which is the next point.
Right.
And to really drive home the role of chance, Housel shares another powerful example. Bill Gates and Kent Evans.
Okay.
We all know Bill Gates' staggering intellect, relentless work ethic, sure. But Housel points out this 1 in a million stroke of luck. Gates attended one of the only high schools in the entire world with an advanced computer back in 1968.
Wow, 1968.
Yeah.
That's unbelievable access.
Unbelievable. This was decades before PCs were common. This rare access, made possible by a forward-thinking teacher, and get this, the school's Mothers Club rummage sale.
A rummage sale.
Yeah, it allowed Gates and Paul Allen to hone their programming skills from a really young age. That head start was, undeniably foundational to Microsoft's success.
No question.
Now, consider his best friend at the time, Ken Evans, equally talented, equally ambitious, by all accounts just as skilled with computers, just as business-minded as Gates. They schemed together about their future, becoming CEOs or generals.
Okay, so what happened to him?
Ken tragically died in a mountaineering accident before graduating high school.
Oh, wow.
It's the same magnitude of an unlikely event, a 1 in a million chance. One incredibly positive for Gates, one utterly devastating for Evans, that profoundly altered their paths. These stories illustrate just how incredibly difficult it is to separate skill from luck. And they challenge those, often oversimplified narratives we consume from places like Forbes magazine, which tend to focus only on individual genius, not the broader, messy mix of forces.
Yeah, it makes you rethink those self-made stories a bit. I imagine many listeners are thinking about their own market experiences now, realizing perhaps it wasn't just pure skill or just plain bad luck that shaped their outcomes.
Yeah.
So recognizing these powerful, invisible forces of luck and risk, how does Housel then transition to the idea of less ego, more wealth? Because it seems like a lot of people flaunt their wealth precisely to boost their ego, right?
That's exactly the paradox Housel wants us to wrestle with. The core idea here is that true wealth, genuine wealth, isn't about what you spend and show off for others to see. It's about what you don't spend. It's the unseen assets, the quiet accumulation that provides options, flexibility, and ultimately real freedom. Housel illustrates this so vividly with his experience working as a valet in Los Angeles.
Oh yeah, the valet story.
Right. He observed people driving these incredibly expensive cars, Ferraris, Lamborghinis, and he realized something. Onlookers weren't necessarily admiring them, the driver.
What were they admiring then?
Mostly, the cars served as a benchmark for their own desires. The subconscious thought wasn't, wow, that person is cool, but rather, wow, if I had that car, people would think I'm cool.
That's a subtle but really important distinction.
It is. It highlights how visible richness is often more about our own aspirations for status than genuine admiration for the owner. And he drives this point home further with the story of Roger. Remember him?
Vaguely.
The
Porsche guy.
That's him. A contemporary who drove a Porsche, leading everyone to assume he was incredibly rich. But then one day, Roger shows up in an old Honda.
Oh, no.
And explains, apparently without much shame, that his Porsche had been repossessed after he defaulted on the loan. This visible richness, the high spending, was actually masking deep insolvency. It's just a stark reminder that what you see isn't necessarily what is.
It's almost like a consumerist treadmill that we get stuck on, isn't it? We keep buying things thinking it'll bring us happiness or status, but then our expectations just rise and we're never truly satisfied. It just keeps going.
Absolutely. And that treadmill links directly back to Housel's discussion in Chapter 3 about the goalpost problem. Remember that?
Yeah, where the goalposts keep moving.
Exactly. He argues that the hardest financial skill isn't picking the right stock or saving a certain percentage. It's getting your goalpost to stop moving. If your expectations constantly rise with your results, if you always need more, bigger, flashier, you'll never feel truly satisfied. And this endless pursuit often leads to taking greater risks, pushing you to chase an ever-receding target. So, less ego, more wealth, challenges that whole consumerist mindset head-on. It encourages you to define wealth internally, through self-control, living below your means, rather than falling into that psychological trap of constantly comparing yourself to others and trying to keep up with the Joneses. It's about building a hidden reservoir of assets that grants you freedom, not a public display of possessions that just fuels an unsustainable cycle of desire and discontent.
So if letting go of ego leads to more wealth, how do we make sure our financial decisions actually align with our deepest desires, like, say, getting good night's sleep? I love that Housel uses that as a metric. It's so human.
It's incredibly human, isn't it? And it leads directly to the next confession, that you should aim to be reasonable over rational when making financial decisions.
Reasonable over rational. Okay.
The core idea is that we shouldn't strive for cold mathematical rationality in our financial choices, but rather for strategies that are reasonable ones you can actually stick with long term, which maximizes your peace of mind and, yes, your sleep at night.
Makes sense.
Housel shares a fascinating example. Nobel laureate Harry Markowitz, the economist who pioneered modern portfolio theory.
Yeah.
When asked how he invested his own money, Markowitz confessed that back in the 1950s, he just split his money 50-50 between bonds and equities.
50-50. Not some complex allocation?
Nope. His reasoning: he wanted to minimize future regret, not achieve some mathematically optimal return. His goal was to avoid the emotional pain of missing out on a huge market surge or being wiped out by a crash. It wasn't strictly rational on paper, maybe, but it was profoundly reasonable for his personal well-being. He wanted to sleep well.
Wow. So even the person who literally created modern portfolio theory wasn't always going for the purely optimal solution if it meant sacrificing his peace of mind. That's wonderfully liberating for those of us who aren't Nobel laureates.
Absolutely. It gives everyone permission to be human, right?
Mm-hmm.
Another compelling example Housel provides is a rational academic study from Yale back in 2008.
Okay.
It suggested that young savers should use 2.1 margin, basically leveraging their stock investments with twice as much borrowed money.
Whoa. Okay. That sounds risky.
Extremely. Mathematically, it showed higher expected returns, even if you faced ruin, provided you got back in the game afterwards. But Housel calls this absurdly unreasonable in real life.
Yeah, I can see why.
I mean, think about it. Few, if any, normal people could mentally recover from a 100% loss of their retirement account and just, shrug and carry on with the same strategy the next day. The emotional toll, the psychological damage would just be too great for most.
Definitely.
He uses a simple analogy. We take medicine to reduce a fever, right? Even though science might suggest fevers can actually aid recovery by activating the immune system. Why do we do it? Because fevers hurt. We prioritize comfort and immediate relief over pure scientific rationality. And this just underscores that finance isn't only about numbers. It's deeply guided by human behavior, emotions, social dynamics. A strategy's stick-to-itiveness, your ability to actually adhere to it over the long haul, is far more important than its theoretical perfection on a spreadsheet. So this confession really gives you, the listener, permission to make financial choices that prioritize your comfort and mental well-being, even if they aren't what a pure spreadsheet might recommend. It's about finding what truly works for you and allows you to live without constant financial anxiety. Because ultimately, what's wealth if you can't sleep?
That makes so much sense. It really resonates. So if sleeping well at night is our guiding principle, what's the single most powerful thing you can do as an investor to achieve your goals? Housel says it's extending your time horizon, which sounds simple, but the implications seem massive.
It sounds deceptively simple, doesn't it? But this is truly one of the most fundamental and profound insights in the book. Time is the ultimate multiplier in investing. Housel emphasizes that consistent, even modest returns over a very long period far, far outweigh sporadic high returns. The magic lies in compounding. And it's almost impossible for our linear brains to truly grasp its exponential power.
We always think linearly.
We do. The most famous example, of course, is Warren Buffett. His extraordinary fortune isn't solely due to his skill as an investor, though he's obviously skilled. Critically, it's because he has been a good investor since he was literally a child, starting at age 10.
Since he was 10?
Yeah. And the vast majority of his wealth, something like an astounding 99% of it, was accumulated after his 50th birthday.
That's incredible. It blows your mind.
It's so counterintuitive because we tend to think of wealth as something built rapidly, But Buffett's story is one of sheer longevity and consistent behavior over decades.
Consistency in time.
Exactly. And to illustrate this further, Housel contrasts Buffett with Jim Simons, the head of Renaissance Technology. Is you familiar with him?
The quant genius, right. Insane returns.
Insane returns. Simons has compounded money at an incredible 66% annually since 1988, a rate that just blows Buffett's 22% out of the water.
So he must be way richer then.
Logically, you'd think so, but Simons is actually 75% less rich than Buffett.
How is that possible with those returns?
Because Simons didn't find his investment stride until he was 50. He had less than half the time to compound his wealth compared to Buffett. Housel calculates that if Simons had Buffett's time horizon, his fortune would be, well, the number is basically meaningless, like $63 quintillion or something absurd.
Okay, yeah, that's just wow.
These ridiculous numbers just highlight how profoundly time impacts compounding. It's the secret sauce.
Those numbers are mind-boggling and really highlight how our brains just struggle with exponential growth. And it's not just about getting rich, but also about avoiding ruin along the way, right? I'm thinking of Rick Guerin here, the third guy in the Buffett Munger group.
Exactly. That's a crucial part of staying in the game long enough for time to work. Housel reminds us of Rick Guerin, who was, by all accounts, equally smart as Buffett and Munger, but critically, he was in a hurry.
Impatient.
Impatient and used leverage. During the brutal 1973-74 market downturn, which saw stocks drop something like 70%.
Ouch.
Guerin was heavily leveraged with margin loans. This led to margin calls, forcing him to sell his Berkshire stock at a massive loss. It effectively wiped him out. He lacked the patience and, maybe more importantly, the room for error to stay in the game. It just demonstrates that survival and longevity are absolutely paramount if you want compounding to work its magic.
You have to be able to stick around.
You have to stick around. And you mentioned technology earlier. It's a perfect parallel. Think about hard drive storage growth. From a few megabytes in the 50s, maybe a few dozen in the 60s, 70 megabytes in the 70s. Then suddenly around 1999, boom, gigabytes. By 2017, 60 terabytes. The growth from 1950 to 1990 was tiny in comparison, less than 300 megabytes. But from 1990 to today, it's like 100 million megabytes.
It just explodes.
It explodes. Even Bill Gates underestimated this. He famously questioned why anyone would need a whole gigabyte of storage for Gmail back in 2004.
Huh. That's funny in retrospect.
It is. It shows how seemingly small, consistent changes compound into these logic-defying results over time, and how we, with our linear brains, often fail to grasp that exponential growth. So the practical takeaway here for you, the listeners, really embrace a long-term mindset. Focus on consistent, modest growth you can actually maintain rather than chasing high, unsustainable returns. Patience really is your most valuable asset.
But sticking around for the long haul, as we just discussed, means you have to be okay with things going wrong sometimes? A lot of times, maybe. And Housel says that's precisely how the world works, that embracing failure is actually a feature, not a bug. That sounds incredibly counterintuitive to most people's instincts about success.
It absolutely does sound counterintuitive, but it's such a critical concept. He calls it the tails you win principle.
Tails you win, okay.
The core idea is that a few rare outlier events, what Housel calls tail events, account for the vast majority of outcomes in success, particularly in investing and business. This means you can actually be wrong most of the time and still end up being enormously successful.
Wrong most of the time. That's hard to swallow.
It is. Think of Heinz Berggruen, the art dealer who fled Nazi Germany. He acquired thousands and thousands of artworks throughout his life. Housel estimates maybe 99% of them turned out to be of little value, but the 1% that were Picasso's, Matisse's, Klee's, those made his fortune. He could be wrong 99% of the time and still end up stupendously rich because of those few tails.
Wow. Okay, that's a clear example.
The same pattern applies to Walt Disney. He produced hundreds of cartoons, most of which initially lost money or barely broke even. But Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, that single film transformed his company. It earned $8 million in its first 6 months back in 1938, which was just an order of magnitude higher than anything the company had earned before. In business terms, those 83 minutes of Snow White were almost all that truly mattered for the company's trajectory then.
One massive hit covers everything else.
Pretty much. And this principle extends even more dramatically to venture capital. Data shows that something like 65% of VC investments lose money.
65%.
Yeah, lose money. But a tiny fraction, maybe 0.5%, generate 50x or even 100x returns. And those few huge winners drive the majority of the entire industry's profits. It's the same in public markets. Housel cites data showing 40% of Russell 3000 companies essentially failed, losing 70% or more of their value since 1980. But a mere 7% of the companies accounted for nearly all of the index's spectacular 73-fold return over that period.
So it's not about being right every single time, or even most of the time. It's about positioning yourself to participate in those few really big wins when they happen. Even leaders like Jeff Bezos and Reed Hastings seem to embrace this, almost seeking out failure sometimes.
Exactly. They get it. Jeff Bezos, for example, famously stated after the failed Amazon Fire phone launch, "If you think that's a big failure, we're working on much bigger failures right now."
Huh. Love that attitude.
He understands that innovation requires a willingness to fail often because the payoff from the successes can be so enormous. Similarly, Netflix CEO Reed Hastings once remarked that their hit ratio is way too high, pushing his content team to take more risk and accept a higher cancellation rate because, again, the few successes are just so powerful.
It's like they want more failures to ensure they're swinging big enough.
Precisely. Even someone like Chris Rock, comedic genius, he tests hundreds, maybe thousands of jokes in small clubs to find the few tales that become famous parts of his specials. We only see the polished success, not the mountain of failures that preceded it. So this analysis really normalizes the reality that many efforts will fail. It encourages you not to be discouraged by individual losses, but to focus on your overall portfolio, your overall strategy, and the potential for a few big winners to compensate for many duds. It shifts the mindset from needing perfection to needing resilience. Viewing individual failures not as personal inadequacy, but as an inevitable, even necessary part of the process for long-term success.
It sounds like resilience is absolutely key then. And speaking of what really drives happiness, not just success, Housel reminds us that money's highest dividend isn't a fancy car. It's something far less tangible, control over your own time. This point really hits home for so many people, I think. Let's really dig into this one, because it's probably one of Housel's most powerful insights.
It's undoubtedly one of his most universally resonant confessions, yeah. And one that often feels counterintuitive in a culture that so strongly links money to possessions, to stuff. The core idea is that money's greatest intrinsic value isn't material. It's its ability to buy you control over your time, offering independence, autonomy, which are truly universal predictors of happiness.
More than income or status.
Much more, according to the research Housel cites from University of Michigan psychologist Angus Campbell. His work found that having a strong sense of controlling one's life is a more dependable predictor of positive feelings of well-being than any of the objective conditions of life.
Wow.
That includes salary, house size, job prestige, you name it. Money, in this sense, buys you the ability to do what you want, when you want, with whom you want, for as long as you want. And that freedom, that autonomy, is truly priceless.
Yeah, you can't put a price tag on that.
You really can't. Housel shares his own experience from an investment banking internship. He actually loved the intellectually stimulating work, the challenge, but he was utterly miserable. Why? Because of the uncontrolled hours, the grueling pace, the total lack of personal agency.
Right, the banking lifestyle.
Exactly. He lasted only a month. It illustrates this concept called reactance, the psychological phenomenon where people intensely dislike feeling disempowered or controlled. Doing something you love on a schedule you can't control can feel just as bad as doing something you hate, because you lose that fundamental human need for autonomy.
That concept of reactance is so interesting. Can you give us another quick, perhaps more everyday example of how people experience that feeling of disempowerment, even in seemingly positive situations, like outside of finance?
Oh, certainly. Think about a parent who adores their children but starts to feel resentful when their entire daily schedule is dictated, minute by school pickups, soccer practice, music lessons, bedtime routines, leaving absolutely no room for spontaneous personal time or pursuing their own interests.
Yeah, I can see that.
Or maybe think of an artist who loves painting, but feels creatively stifled when their work becomes entirely commission-based, with rigid client demands, strict deadlines, and very specific limitations on their artistic expression. Even though the outcome might be good, the kids are thriving, the art sells, that lack of control, that feeling of being directed can diminish the joy and lead directly to that feeling of reactance. It chips away at your intrinsic motivation.
That makes a lot of sense. It's not just about the task, but the feeling of control over the task.
Exactly. And Housel also provides the powerful anecdote of Derek Sivers. Remember him? CD Baby founder.
Yeah, I think so.
At 22, he saved just $12,000, which, by allowing him to live on only $1,000 a month, enabled him to quit his $20K a year job and become a full-time musician.
$12,000 gave him that freedom.
That little bit of savings bought him control over his time. And he stated later that selling his company years later for millions, literally millions of dollars, didn't impact his happiness nearly as much as gaining control over his time back when he was 22. That early financial independence, that autonomy, was far more life-changing for him than the later massive wealth.
Wow. That really puts it in perspective. And it seems like in our modern world, with so many of us being knowledge workers, that sense of time control is even more elusive, doesn't it? Our work never really seems to turn off.
It absolutely is more elusive. The shift Housel describes from primarily manual labor jobs, which were like 81% of employment back in 1870.
Right. Factory whistle blows, you go home.
Exactly. To today's economy, where maybe 38% are managers, officials, and professionals, and 41% are in service jobs. It means our head is always on. We're constantly thinking about work, checking emails, taking calls after hours, blurring the lines between work and leisure in a way that just wasn't possible before.
Yeah, the phone is always buzzing.
Right. And this diminishes our perceived time control, even if we have more overall wealth than previous generations, because that mental space is constantly occupied. Housel references a fascinating study by gerontologist Carl Pillemer, who interviewed 1,000 elderly Americans. And guess what? None of them valued money or possessions as the key to happiness.
What did they value?
They cherished quality friendships, having a sense of purpose, and crucially, unstructured time spent with their children. There's this poignant quote: "Your kids don't want your money anywhere near as much as they want you."
Oof, that hits hard.
It does. So what this really boils down to is that money buys you options. It buys flexibility. The ability to retire when you want, not when you're forced to. The freedom to choose meaningful work, even if it pays less. This control over your time is often far more valuable than accumulating more material goods. It encourages you, the listener, to view your financial decisions through this lens of time control, prioritizing experiences and freedom over just endlessly accumulating possessions.
This idea of true wealth being about freedom, about time, not flashiness, makes perfect sense when you lay it out like that. And Housel gives us another gem that follows logically. Be nicer and less flashy. It sounds almost too simple to be a financial confession, but there's a deep truth hiding in there, isn't there?
There really is, and it's a profound observation that directly counters a lot of common assumptions about wealth and status signaling. The core idea here, which Housel elaborates on back in Chapter 8, Man in the Car Paradox, and Chapter 9, Wealth is What You Don't See, is that most people fundamentally desire respect and admiration from others.
Sure, that seems human.
Right. But they mistakenly believe that acquiring expensive possessions, flashy stuff, will automatically bring it. In reality, Housel argues things like humility, kindness, empathy. Those are far more effective at earning genuine, lasting respect. He revisits that valet paradox we talked about earlier.
Right, the fancy cars.
When you see someone driving a really fancy car, you rarely think, wow, that person is cool. Instead, your internal thought is usually closer to, wow, if I had that car, people would think I'm cool.
Huh. It's about projecting yourself onto the object.
Exactly. It reveals that the display of wealth often serves your own aspiration for status, your own ego, rather than actually eliciting genuine admiration for the owner from others. It's kind of a disconnect.
Yeah, that's subtle but true.
Housel encapsulates this perfectly in a letter he wrote to his newborn son. It's a really powerful and candid piece of advice where he states, and I'm paraphrasing slightly, "You might think you want an expensive car, a fancy watch, and a huge house, but I'm telling you, you don't. What you want is respect and admiration from other people, and you think having expensive stuff will bring it. It almost never does, especially from the people you actually want to respect and admire you."
Wow, that's direct.
It is. This analysis just underscores that visible spending is often more a reflection of ego or maybe insecurity than true wealth. And it rarely achieves its intended social purpose of earning deep respect. So it's a powerful reminder for you, the listener, to perhaps redirect some effort away from outward display and materialism towards cultivating internal character, kindness, empathy, humility, because that's what truly earns lasting respect and admiration in any walk of life, regardless of your bank balance.
That's a powerful and often overlooked truth in our consumer culture. Okay, so if we embrace humility, focus on intrinsic values like time control, what's the next really actionable step Housel recommends? He simply says, save, just save. But do we really need convincing to save money? It feels like we're constantly told to save, yet so many Americans struggle with it. What's the specific angle here?
You're right. The advice to save more is everywhere, almost to the point of being background noise. But Housel argues that many people fall into camps of either not believing they can save, maybe because their income feels too tight, or not believing they need to save, perhaps because they expect future income growth or investment returns to do the heavy lifting.
Okay.
His point isn't just to save for a specific big purchase like a house, or only for retirement decades down the line. It's to save for saving's sake, viewing savings as this undefined power, a crucial hedge against life's inevitable, unpredictable surprises. The core idea is that saving money is one of the most powerful and crucially controllable aspects of wealth building, even without a specific defined goal attached to every dollar saved. It acts as your defense against the unpredictable nature of the world.
Saving for the unknown, essentially.
Exactly. He draws a fantastic analogy back in Chapter 10, comparing it to energy efficiency. Remember the 1970s when the world was terrified of running out of oil?
Yeah, the oil crisis.
We didn't solve that crisis just by finding more oil, which is uncertain, expensive, and often out of our direct control. We largely solved it by becoming much more efficient with the energy we already had. Think cars doubling their miles per gallon since 1975, or the fact that the U.S. now uses about 60% less energy per dollar of GDP than it did back in 1950. Becoming more efficient with what we use is largely within our control.
Okay, I see the parallel.
The same applies to money. Investment returns. They're uncertain, volatile, largely out of your control. Your future income, also uncertain. But personal savings and frugality, your financial conservation and efficiency, that's almost entirely within your control. And it has a 100% chance of being effective in building the gap between what you have and what you spend.
That's a great way to reframe it. So savings aren't just for down payment or retirement. They're for the crazy things that come out of nowhere. The unexpected curveballs life inevitably throws at us, like losing a job or a health issue.
Precisely. Housel connects this directly to the concept of room for error from Chapter 13. He uses that vivid, slightly strange example of German tanks in WWII being unexpectedly defeated by field mice chewing through electrical insulation inside the tanks.
Field mice.
Yes.
Seriously.
Seriously, an utterly unforeseen, unpredictable risk that derailed sophisticated machinery. Undefined savings, money saved without a specific job, are your defense against those kinds of crazy things that are just too wild or specific to predict in any standard financial plan. Savings provide options and flexibility. The ability to wait out a bad job market, to pounce on an unexpected investment opportunity to change careers, or even to take a lower paying but more purposeful job, linking back to that idea of time control. This hidden return on savings, the sheer flexibility, the reduction in stress, the peace of mind it grants can be far more valuable than any small interest rate you might earn on it in the short term.
Yeah, that optionality is priceless.
It really is. Housel emphasizes that the value of wealth is always relative to what you need. And lowering your expenses, which is a form of humility and efficiency, is much more reliably in your control than trying to endlessly increase income or chase ever higher investment returns. This empowers you by highlighting that saving is an active, controllable decision, and its benefits extend far beyond just hitting a specific purchase goal. It provides crucial resilience and freedom against life's continuous chain of surprises.
Okay, saving gives us that crucial flexibility, that buffer, but investing itself still has its own unique set of challenges, doesn't it? Housel tells us to define the cost of success and be ready to pay it. What's that price tag we often miss, or perhaps try really hard to avoid paying?
This confession is all about acknowledging a fundamental truth, one that's often conveniently overlooked or underestimated, especially when markets are going up. Successful investing, like pretty much anything truly worthwhile, demands a price. But this currency isn't typically dollars and cents paid up front. It's paid in volatility, fear, doubt, uncertainty, and regret, all those uncomfortable emotions that are easy to dismiss intellectually until you're actually experiencing them in real time during a market downturn.
The emotional price.
Exactly. This is a key concept from Chapter 15, which is aptly titled Nothing's Free. Housel uses the cautionary tale of General Electric under CEO Jack Welch. Welch was famous, or maybe infamous, for ensuring GE's quarterly earnings consistently beat Wall Street estimates, often by massaging the numbers, like pulling gains from future quarters into the current one.
Right, managing earnings.
Yeah. This created an illusion of incredibly consistent, predictable growth. It effectively shielded investors from the normal volatility that is the natural price you pay for market returns. It looked great for a long time.
But it wasn't sustainable.
Not at all. The bill came due eventually, and spectacularly. GE's huge financial division plunged into chaos during the 2008 crisis. Subsequent big bets in oil and energy also went disastrously wrong, leading to billions and billions in write-offs, a slashed dividend, and the stock falling dramatically. It demonstrated that returns are never truly free. Trying to avoid paying the price of volatility in the short term only led to a much larger, more painful bill later on.
So you have to accept the ups and downs.
You have to. Housel points out that the S&P 500 index increased something like 119-fold over 50 years, a truly spectacular return. But to actually capture those returns, you had to endure the index trading below its previous high on countless days, weeks, months, even years sometimes. He gives examples like Netflix stock. Despite over 35,000% returns over its life, it traded below its previous all-time high 94% of the time.
94%, that's staggering.
It is. Or Monster Beverage, with mind-boggling 319,000% returns, traded below its high 95% of the time. This constant, never-ending taunt from the market, as he calls it, is the price of admission for those potentially huge long-term gains.
And it sounds like trying to avoid this price, this volatility like GE did, or maybe market timers try to do, can actually make things worse, not better. It's almost like trying to skip the gym because you don't like sweating, but then you never actually get fit.
Precisely. That's a fantastic analogy. Housel notes that tactical mutual funds, the ones that try to get market returns without the downside risk by constantly switching between stocks and bonds based on forecasts, well, they largely underperformed simple buy-and-hold strategies over time. Morningstar found most of them just didn't deliver. In effect, they paid fees for the active management, and they missed out on returns by trying to avoid the necessary fee of volatility.
So they paid more for less.
Pretty much. Housel uses another great analogy, the one about Disneyland. A ticket costs, say, $100. You pay it willingly because you view it as a fee for an awesome experience, right? A few people view it as a punishment or a fine.
Right, it's the cost of entry.
Exactly. Similarly, market volatility should be viewed as a fee, a necessary cost of admission to potentially get good long-term returns, rather than a fine, a penalty for doing something wrong or making a bad decision. This mindset shift is crucial for you, the investor. If you view a market downturn as a fine, your natural inclination is to try and avoid future fines, which often leads to panic selling at the worst possible time. But if you see it as a fee, you're mentally prepared to pay it, knowing it's just part of the deal for achieving long-term growth. This helps you mentally prepare for downturns, reframe them as a necessary cost, not a punishment, and critically helps you stay the course.
Okay, so accepting these fees, this volatility, is crucial. But how do we balance taking necessary risks, those growth-oriented risks we need to take, with avoiding complete ruin? Housel calls it liking risk, but being paranoid of ruinous risk, which sounds like walking a very fine line. How do we manage that?
It does sound like a tightrope, doesn't it? But it's actually a very practical and robust approach Housel introduces, drawing heavily from Chapter 13, Room for Error. He calls it the barbelled approach to risk.
Barbelled, like weights.
Exactly like weights, heavy on the ends, maybe lighter in the middle. The core idea is straightforward. You absolutely must take risks to get ahead, to grow your wealth significantly over time. But, and this is the crucial part, you must never, ever take a risk that has the potential to wipe you out completely. Survival is absolutely paramount, because if you get wiped out, you're out of the game. You can't recover.
Game over.
Game over. Housel illustrates this starkly with the chilling Russian roulette syndrome. Statistically, yes, the odds are technically in your favor in any single round of Russian roulette. But the downside, absolute ruin, the complete and irreversible loss of everything, is completely unacceptable, regardless of the probability. There is simply no margin of safety, no potential upside that can compensate for that kind of catastrophic risk.
Right, the consequence is too high.
Exactly. And the devil in this context, the thing that often turns manageable risks into ruinous ones, Housel warns, is leverage. Taking on excessive debt.
Leverage.
Leverage magnifies both returns and losses. It pushes routine, survivable risks into potentially ruinous territory. He points out that homeowners who were wiped out in 2009 due to being over-leveraged didn't just lose their homes. They also lost the opportunity to take advantage of incredibly cheap mortgage rates and depressed home prices just a year or two later in 2010-2011. They were simply out of the game, unable to benefit from the recovery because they hadn't survived the downturn.
They missed the rebound entirely.
They missed it. The barbelled strategy, then, suggests being, as Housel puts it, risk-loving and yet completely averse to ruin. This might mean taking calculated, intelligent risks with one portion of your money, your growth assets, maybe aggressive stocks or venture capital if that's your thing, but at the same time being terrified and ultra-conservative with another, perhaps larger portion that secures your core needs, your basic living expenses, your ability to stay in the game no matter what.
So safe on one end, risky on the other.
Kind of. It ensures you have that crucial endurance. It allows you to potentially benefit from those low probability, high payoff tail events we talked about, while guaranteeing you survive the inevitable field mice, those unforeseen, unpredictable risks that can derail even the most sophisticated plans. This framework encourages intelligent risk-taking for growth while building in robust safeguards against catastrophic loss, protecting your ability to continue investing and building wealth over the long haul. It's about surviving to play another day.
That's a really smart, practical framework for thinking about risk. Okay, so all these lessons, humility, ego, time, risk, survival, they really seem to point towards one crucial overarching thing: understanding your own personal financial landscape. And that means, as Housel puts it, defining the game you're playing. This feels incredibly important in an age of constant financial noise and comparison.
It is arguably one of the most powerful and, I think, often overlooked pieces of wisdom in the entire book, coming from chapter 16, You and Me. The core idea is deceptively simple. Different investors have vastly different goals, different resources, and critically different time horizons. You absolutely must identify clearly what game you are playing, rather than getting swayed or influenced by the actions and opinions of others who are playing a completely different game.
Can you give an example of different games?
Sure. Housel asks a simple but profound question. How much did you pay for Google stock today? The right answer, he explains, depends entirely on your time horizon, your game. A 30-year buy-and-hold investor saving for retirement. A one-year trader trying to capture short-term momentum. A day trader looking to make a profit by lunchtime. They will all have vastly different, yet potentially rational for them, prices they're willing to take for the exact same stock. Because their motivations, their risk tolerance, their definitions of success, and their timeframes are fundamentally different.
Right. The day trader doesn't care about 30-year prospects.
Not at all. And this confusion of games, this failure to distinguish between them, is precisely how bubbles often form and inflate. Think about the dot-com bubble or the mid-2000s housing bubble. These often occur, Housel argues, when long-term investors, maybe regular folks saving for retirement, innocently start taking their cues from short-term traders or speculators.
Following the herd.
Exactly. These short-term players, driven by momentum and the expectation of flipping the asset quickly to someone else playing the same short-term game, might rationally pay seemingly ridiculous prices. But their actions inflate prices to levels that are completely irrelevant, disconnected from fundamentals, and potentially disastrous for a long-term investor who gets caught up in the frenzy. If you don't clearly define your game, social comparison and herd mentality can easily derail your own carefully crafted strategy.
So how do you define your game?
Housel shares his own clear mission statement as an example. He says something like, I am a passive investor, optimistic in the world's ability to generate real economic growth, and I'm confident that over the next 30 years that growth will accrue to my investments. That's his game. That absolute clarity helps him ignore irrelevant market noise, ignore what the day traders are doing, ignore the short-term forecasts, and avoid being persuaded by others playing a different game entirely. This confession really empowers you, the listener, to take a step back, clarify your own financial objectives, define your own time frame, resist those external pressures and comparisons, and forge a path that truly serves your unique needs and timelines, not someone else's agenda.
And finally, a confession that seems to tie everything together, bringing us right back to the human element we started this whole conversation with: respect the mess. This one really resonates with just how messy and unpredictable and, well, human life and money can be, doesn't it?
It absolutely does, and it's kind of a perfect culmination of Housel's entire philosophy throughout the book. The core idea here is that finance is fundamentally driven by human behavior, by emotions, by biases, by relationships, not by precise formulas or cold, hard math like physics. And because of this inherent, inescapable human element, there is simply no single right answer that applies to everyone. There is only what works for you in your specific circumstances with your specific psychology. It's subjective, highly subjective. Housel brilliantly brings back that analogy of the 1931 dentist Clarence Hughes, remember him? The guy who had 16 teeth and his tonsils removed without his consent because the doctor believed there was one universal right way to cure his fever.
Right, the jarring example from the start.
That rigid doctor knows best ethos in medicine has thankfully shifted towards one of patient autonomy, recognizing that different patients have wildly different values, risk tolerances, and preferences for treatment. The same, House argues forcefully, applies to finance. There's no single right portfolio or right savings rate for everyone.
It depends on the person.
Completely. He even quotes the physicist Richard Feynman, who famously said something like, imagine how much harder physics would be if electrons had feelings. Well, finance is that hard because investors do have feelings. Lots of them. Fear, greed, regret, overconfidence, FOMO.
All those messy feelings.
All of them. And this explains why we're generally so bad at predicting the future, as he explored back in chapters 12, 18, and 19. We often believe what we want to be true. We latch onto appealing fictions. We tell ourselves stories to fill in our blind spots, which often leads to overconfidence and being completely blindsided by inevitable surprises. And remember chapter 1, the very first chapter, no one's crazy.
Yeah, a great starting point.
It emphasizes that people's unique life experiences, growing up poor versus wealthy, experiencing high inflation versus stable prices, shape vastly different, yet perfectly reasonable from their perspective, views on money, risk, and saving.
So it's not about finding the perfect universal rule, but recognizing the individual context, the individual mess surrounding every financial decision. It's about accepting that finance is maybe more art than science, in a way.
Precisely. That's a great way to put it. Financial decisions aren't made in the vacuum of a spreadsheet alone. They are made at the dinner table. They're influenced by emotions, by spouses, by concerns about children, by deeply personal histories and biases. Decisions are often made not with the primary goal of maximizing returns, but maybe of minimizing the chance of disappointing a loved one, or achieving a basic sense of personal security, or simply aligning spending and saving with one's core values. This makes finance inherently complex, nuanced, deeply individual, and yes, messy. So this final confession encourages self-awareness, acceptance of your own personal biases and history, and adopting a personalized approach to managing your money. It validates your unique journey and reminds you that, in this messy, human-driven world of finance, what might seem crazy or irrational to one person often makes perfect sense to another based on their experiences and priorities. Because, as Housel wisely concludes, when you understand someone's background, no one is crazy.
That's such a comforting and empowering place to land. Okay, so with all these profound lessons on humility, ego, peace of mind, the power of time, respecting the mess, it's natural to wonder, well, how does the author himself actually apply all this to his own money? You mentioned earlier Housel pulls back the curtain in this chapter, sharing his deeply personal confessions about his own savings and investing. How does he actually live these principles day to day?
Yeah, this is where Housel really grounds his philosophy in his own lived experience, providing a tangible and I think really relatable blueprint for us. His core financial goal, he states unequivocally, is not to be the richest guy on the block or even to maximize his net worth on paper. Instead, it's all about achieving true independence.
Independence, that word keeps coming up.
It's central. For him, independence means the ability to do what he wants, with whom he wants, when he wants, for as long as he wants. That deeply personal value drives his entire savings philosophy. He talks about being profoundly influenced by his parents' story. His father became a doctor relatively late, at age 40, with 3 kids already, and despite eventually earning a high income, the family maintained a pretty frugal mentality that was forged during earlier, leaner years. This high savings rate allowed his father, after 2 demanding decades working in a high-stress ER job, to simply quit one day and move on, entirely on his own terms, without financial stress. That experience instilled in Housel the belief that the freedom to change course when you're ready, not when circumstances force you, is the grandmother of all financial goals.
Wow, that's a powerful inheritance, that mindset.
It really is. So Housel and his wife made a conscious decision early on to maintain the moderate sort of entry-level lifestyle they established in their 20s, even as their incomes rose significantly over the following decade. This intentional choice meant that, as he puts it, virtually every dollar of raise has accrued to savings, which they think of as their independence fund.
They didn't let lifestyle creep happen.
Exactly. By getting the goalpost of lifestyle desires to stop moving at a young age, they achieved a very high savings rate without feeling constantly deprived or repressively frugal. It became their normal. And he openly admits to making what many would call a financially worst decision from a purely rational, numbers on a spreadsheet perspective.
Which was?
Paying off their home mortgage entirely, even when interest rates were absurdly low. A purely rational advisor would have screamed, "No! Leverage that cheap money. Invest the difference for higher returns."
Right, arbitrage the difference.
But for Housel, the psychological benefit, the feeling of independence that came from owning their home outright, far exceeds the known financial gain he would have gotten from carrying that mortgage debt. This perfectly demonstrates his reasonable, rational principle in practice. He prioritized his peace of mind and his feeling of independence over pure financial optimization.
He paid for sleep-at-night insurance.
That's a great way to put it. He also emphasizes saving a lot without a specific goal attached to it, explicitly saving for a world where curveballs are more common than we expect. That's a direct application of the room for error principle, building that buffer against life's inherent messiness and unpredictability. So this section really shows you a real-world application of his principles. It demonstrates that personal values can, and maybe even should, trump pure financial optimization sometimes. And it highlights that independence is attainable at almost any income level through conscious, disciplined choices about spending and saving.
That's a powerful and refreshingly honest insight into how he puts these principles into practice himself. Okay, so how does this philosophy prioritizing independence, embracing the reasonable over the purely rational, how does that translate into his actual investing strategy? Does he have some complex secret formula? Is he trying to beat the market?
You might expect that given his insights, but actually it's quite the opposite. His investing strategy is, maybe surprisingly to some, incredibly simple, low cost, and patient. Housel confesses that he actually started his career as an active stock picker back in his 20s. He owned around 25 individual stocks, trying to find those market-beating gems, doing the research, trying to be clever.
Like many people start out.
Exactly. However, he later shifted his views pretty dramatically based on his research and experience. Now, he says, every single stock his family owns is held indirectly through simple, low-cost index funds.
100% index funds.
Yep.
Yep.
His rationale is incredibly pragmatic. While he acknowledges that some people can outperform the market, he believes it's incredibly hard, requires a specific skill set and temperament, and the odds of success are extremely low for the vast majority of investors, even professionals, especially over the long term. He believes that for most people, including himself and likely for you, the average American investor listening, simply dollar cost averaging into a low-cost index fund will provide the highest odds of long-term success.
Keeping it simple and letting the market do the work.
Pretty much. And given his family's frugal lifestyle and high savings rate, Housel has this great line: I can afford to not be the greatest investor in the world, but I can't afford to be a bad one.
That makes a lot of sense. Avoid big mistakes.
Exactly. Avoid the big mistakes that can take you out of the game. That logic makes index investing a no-brainer for them. They can comfortably meet their financial goals of independence without taking on the added risk, the stress, the time commitment, and frankly, the high probability of failure that comes with constantly trying to outperform the market average.
So what does he rely on instead?
His core beliefs, the pillars underpinning his strategy, are first, a high savings rate, which, as we discussed, he controls. Second, immense patience, allowing compounding to work its quiet magic over decades. And third, an enduring, quiet optimism in global economic growth over the very long term, trusting in the positive tails of long-term progress and innovation. He intentionally focuses his energy and effort on the first two, saving and patience, because those are the factors that are almost entirely within his control.
Control what you can control.
Precisely. This whole approach powerfully reinforces the ideas from earlier chapters like confounding, compounding, and tails you win. It's about accepting average market returns for a very long time while simply surviving the market's inevitable ups and downs. That combination, that longevity and consistency, can ultimately lead to extraordinary wealth. It also highlights the often low correlation between the effort you put into investing and the actual results you get. Sometimes, less is more.
Yeah, stop tinkering.
Stop tinkering. So for you, the listener, this offers a really relatable, practical, and blessedly low-stress investing approach. It's particularly appealing if you feel overwhelmed by complex strategies or the pressure to constantly pick winners. It really champions simplicity and discipline as incredibly powerful, maybe even underrated, tools for building long-term wealth.
What a journey through Morgan Housel's financial confessions. Just to recap some key things, we've unpacked why humility and forgiveness in finance are so vital, understanding luck and risk, how true wealth is often about what you don't see, the savings, not the spending, and why sleeping well at night, being reasonable, often matters more than maximizing every last decimal point of return.
Absolutely. And the power of time.
Oh, the incredible power of a long time horizon, yes. Yeah. And why embracing failure, those tails, is actually a feature, not a bug, of successful long-term investing. We've redefined wealth more as control over your time, recognized the subtle but powerful traps of social comparison, and understood that market returns always come with an unavoidable price, that volatility fee.
Right, the fee, not the fine.
Exactly. And maybe most importantly, we've learned the critical need to define your own financial game and respect that in this complex, messy, human-driven world, there's no single right answer, just the answer that works for you. As Housel wisely concludes, No one is crazy.
Indeed. It's such a powerful framework for navigating the often confusing reality of money. So as you, our listener, reflect on these insights, maybe consider this. If your personal financial goal, perhaps like the author's, is ultimately about true independence and peace of mind, what is one conventionally rational financial decision you might consciously choose to forego? What might you skip in favor of a reasonable one that brings you greater control over your time, less stress, or simply helps you sleep better at night? How might embracing this messiness, this individuality, actually reshape your path to wealth? And what does true enough really look like for you?
That's a question worth pondering deeply, for sure. Thank you for that. Okay, next time on the deep dive, we're going to shift gears just slightly. Housel takes us on what he calls a brief history of why the U.S. consumer thinks the way they do. Should be fascinating.
Oh, that sounds really interesting.
Yeah. Get ready for an exploration of the post-WWII American economy. Everything from apparently the intentional birth of modern consumerism to the rise of inequality and how all of that history shaped our current financial psychology, our attitudes towards debt, spending, saving. You definitely won't want to miss it.
Thanks for tuning in to the Book Summary Podcast. If you found value in today's episode, hit that like button, subscribe for more summaries, and share it with someone who's ready to grow. Want deeper insights, exclusive book notes, and reading tips? Join our free newsletter. The link's in the description. And don't forget, if you'd like to read the full book, our affiliate link is right below. It helps support the channel and keeps the summaries coming. Until next time, keep reading, keep growing.